Okay, hey everybody. Welcome to another AI Applied Consortium podcast. We're going to take a little bit of a different approach to our standard technical discussions. I'm going to try to keep things a little loose. It's a Friday at noon. We're hoping that you guys are either going to attend this live or see a recording later. For those of you who haven't seen the podcast before, every week or every other week, we invite one of our trustees, advisors, or ecosystem partners in a discussion around artificial intelligence. And so today I have two esteemed guests, Teesee Murray and Pierre Barbeau. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. But again, just for those of you who haven't seen this before, my goal is to try to engage our AI Applied Consortium audiences as best as possible. And so whether that's through technology or through interesting conversation, at best case, we will do that today. At worst, like I always say, you'll know what not to watch next time. So I'll start by letting Teesee and Pierre introduce themselves, and then we can get going.
I'll start. Hi, I'm Teesee Murray. I'm group president at Turtle. Turtle is a 102-year-old electrical distributor and automation leader nationwide. We work with some of the biggest brands on the planet and have done some of the biggest projects. So that could be modernizing JFK or LAX, or your utility or your electrical grid, or running manufacturing lines. I'm also an innovation and technology geek. I love what we can do together, so I'm thrilled to be part of this consortium.
And I'm Pierre Barbeau. I'm co-founder and CEO of Moblico. We are a mobile engagement company focused on the wholesale distribution industry. We serve over 1,000 distribution centers across Canada, US, and Latin America. And we've introduced AI in our technology in the last year or so. And super excited to be a part of this consortium, share what we've learned, and here to learn as well.
So thank you guys. Appreciate the intros. And like I said, it's a pleasure to have you guys. Here's my little plug is that, all of us are speaking next week in Denver at the Shift and AWMDM event. And when we had this discussion on what can we talk about and not spoil what we're going to share, I took a 180 approach to it, and I decided, well, let's just talk about everything that is not kind of core technology centric, core business centric, and keep things loose. And so we're going to talk about a bunch of funky topics, progressively more and more funky, but again, very much AI centric. And hopefully we'll get through this and also gain interest and continue our discussion maybe in another podcast in a little bit more of a technical way. So the first, I guess, introduction question is more of a question, and I'll maybe lead with it, is when was your aha moment with artificial intelligence where you realized, like, this is really something? And I think mine, to be honest, being a developer, was when I first started using the code generation tools that are available, and I was able to stand up an application in a few minutes that would have taken me a couple of hours to do. And then as I started using it more and more with the tooling that's available out there now, some of the rapid prototyping tooling, the incredible power of that capability of artificial intelligence just blew my mind. I think it's going to completely turn the software development industry, if it's not already, on its head. So that was kind of my aha moment, and I'll let you guys share yours, and then we can kind of unpack that a little bit. So I don't know who wants to go first.
Go ahead, Teesee.
Sure. So my aha moment, there's probably two, right? First, it was about 8 years ago. We were working with a major retailer who's located throughout every city, and nationwide and globally. We were trying to figure out what not to put on sale at the same time. We used thousands of cores to spin up in the cloud, and we were so excited to have the power of AWS in 2014 when no one else used it, to actually get the right answer. But that took thousands of cores to say, don't put beer on sale at the same time as diapers to maximize profits. That was a massive effort. We had 10 data scientists. Fast forward to the advanced technology and Gen AI, and now we have this capability to actually do prototyping and get results like that in a fraction of the time without having to bring in all these technologists and spin up thousands of cores and do a supercomputer. So that rapid prototyping and being able to do the dynamic pricing and maximizing rebates and different things was incredible in terms of being eye-opening and inspiring to go even further.
That's interesting. Pierre?
Look, on a personal note, we do a lot of obviously content creation, marketing stuff here. And when my first use of ChatGPT and its ability to understand what our business does and help us compose content really blew me away. And of course, the more you use it, the better it gets at it. It understands sometimes our business better than we do. So I think it's fascinating how it's been helpful in that context. For Moblico itself, in our sort of the services we provide customers, to give you a little background, we're involved in communication, ordering, and marketing type services distributors use our platform in that context. And for the longest time, we really were looking for a way to get orders that come through communications or mobile apps from our system into an ERP system in a more automated fashion. And until recently, character recognition was really sort of the only option, and it really was kind of kludgy and didn't really do the job that we needed it to do. And once these models became available, we were just totally blown away with how we were able to use it as a baseline to solve a big problem a lot of distributors had, which is the ability to take these orders from these digital channels, and we call swivel chairing, right? And they're going from screen to screen and re-entering in information. We've been able to slash that, eliminate that process, and reduce the time and the errors associated with that. And there's a whole bunch of other benefits, but to us that was a huge.
Have you seen the operator agents from OpenAI, or anything that, like, there's one from Google Mariner? It's a multimodal tools where you can go in. It'll essentially look at your screen, analyze it in a multimodal way, and then take over your screen to perform workflows. Have you seen any of that stuff? That's another aha moment for me, like that, or like it was just like it blew away. Like I had a conversation with someone that had a business model that was basically building agentic agents, and he was talking about a workflow that essentially was like automating some sort of transaction through a web interface by using AI, and like they were selling these things at $250,000, and then 2 days later, OpenAI announced operator agent, and for $200 a month, you basically do the same thing, right?
So yes, I've looked at those because process intelligence and process mapping is so essential still, especially in the regulated industries. So I think as enterprises are looking at it, it's so different than individuals because it's easy to get into trouble with some of those agents. For example, during COVID, some of my customers, we had people that had to go home. My team served essential businesses that were still open and needed to continue running. So we were working and traveling to keep everything flowing for human life. And we automated as much as we could with our customers. But sometimes that automation could run amok. Mm-hmm. And you could get into financial difficulty because it was ordering more than you needed on the replenishment side. And so the controls that are needed for that automated workflow, I think, are some of the other areas that we need to look at, especially if there's a compliance aspect.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree that you probably shouldn't throw your critical processes on a cloud-based open world model that is not yet fully tested. that's for sure. That's for sure. By the way, I'm taller than you guys, and somehow I feel shorter on the screen.
It's the camera. Here, let's see.
I'm 6'3", guys.
Oh yeah, That's 6
That
inches.
doesn't mean we have to overcompensate one way or another.
No. Let's see. I want to be taller.
There you go.
Yeah, Konrad, from our perspective, particularly on the communication side, we're finding a lot of our customers really do want to continue to have that true personal experience, we've adapted our system to allow them to do that by, for example, if they're having, we have essentially a team inbox. So if they're communicating with customers one-on-one, we automatically would incorporate the name of the person that's responding, as an example, right? So the customer knows who they're talking to. So the notion of personal communication is still of high priority, particularly for independent distributors. So we're really looking at AI as an assistant or to help them do their job, as opposed to automating the entire workflow, if that makes sense. And we also make sure there's checks and balances, review and approve type scenarios, so that just the technology is not there yet, right? It's not, you can't match products with 100% certainty all the time. It just doesn't work that way.
So let me ask you, just flip this a little bit. Has the technology ever scared you in terms of what it provided you, either because of the future potential that might lead to malicious intent, or something that it did in the moment where it was like, this is a little bit eerie? And you don't have to name the technology provider. By the way, we don't have any sponsors, so you're not going to offend anyone.
Right.
But
I haven't been scared yet. I've been like, wow, that's possible, right? The generation of graphics and stories and whatnot, and some of the insights that it gives back, things that I used to create, a strategic plan or things of that nature that I'd spend a good amount of thoughtful time putting together. Its ability to write well, write good, proper English, and come up with ideas that are in addition to what I had already planned. That's really, for me, the most earth-shattering thing. It hasn't said anything yet that's really problematic, but I think one of the areas that as humans we haven't considered is we invite all these digital assistants to record and transcribe and take notes, but we haven't edited ourselves to realize, oh, I'm being recorded. And it doesn't understand if I say something facetious and I'm joking, like, oh, Konrad is 6 inches taller than me, but I'm the big person on this show, so I'm going to look bigger, right? And I'm going to make him feel small.
I'm sure it understands, Teesee.
But then you come back and you are reading the summary of the transcript and you see something that doesn't come across with, haha, Teesee's joking. I've seen teammates have moments where it's very difficult, right? Because they are reading something that it doesn't sound right. And this is where it's been more scary in terms of not wanting to lose that human connection and playfulness, but also recognizing that everything being recorded could lead to some problems.
There's I don't want to misinterpret or misrepresent this, but there's like a voice or text to voice tag language that's used by like generative AI technologies to generate voice. And you can, like, if you pass a text to GPT and tell it to use that tagging language, it's like a set of like meta tags to highlight pauses and like different tones. It does a pretty decent job creating those tags in the right places based on what it perceives. It might not perceive it right, but it does generally perceive it right.
Well, that's great to know. See, that's what I love about these dialects is we learn something. Just as Pierre said, I'm here to share, but also to learn. So thank you, Konrad.
Yeah, but I'm not expecting to know this stuff because I'm just like I have nothing to do at night, so I'm going on to auto-gen sites that create, or auto voice generated sites that create like my kid's voice sounding like Eminem or something like that, right? So it's like all these things that I'm unpacking that's probably just out in left field, but it does exist.
Konrad, can I go back to your original question about concerns or fears or just a little personal background? So I used to work for Sprint, and in my years at Sprint, I led the development of the camera phone picture sharing service called Sprint Picture Mail. And my team and I at the time you know, when you're developing new technology, you're innovating, you know, it's exuberance, you're excited, right? You only see the good in what you're doing. That's what drives you forward. And we actually had made a list at the time, like 101 ways to use a camera phone. This is before people had one, right? So you had to, you know, we had all kinds of real creative ideas on how this technology would be used in the market and so forth. And I will tell you, once it launched, once camera phones started to take hold and became a thing, we were getting now feedback from the market, right? And now people were banning them from locker rooms, and we were hearing all this stuff, and we're like, what is happening, right? None of us had that on our list of things camera phones would be used for. The point is that you know, with at the time we used to say, you know, with great technology comes great responsibility. And I think AI takes that to a whole other level. And I'm sure the guys who are thinking forward and are behind a lot of the innovation are focusing on the positive aspects of the technology, but no doubt that there will be a dark side to it. And you know, that's what we got to be on the lookout for.
No, I agree. And I've had two. One, and they're all kind of tangential to core AI. So one, the amount of personalized knowledge and advertising that I get without exposing it, like I'm sure, and in fact, I think this is the case if you kind of unpack this in the language that our smartphones are not just looking at our soft data points like websites, because I don't buy stuff online except for Amazon. Now I put this online, now it's going to be Amazon ads. But the point is, I can talk to my family about the need for a pillow because my back hurts, and I'll get a pillow ad
Right.
in a few days. It's kind of there's some level of intrusion, and I'm sure there's some level of AI in the back end doing that personalization, not just verbatim, right? As I said, with pillow, but like aggregating all the data points. I my tangential example is two. One is Meta, not to create any enemies, but you know they've introduced some state of the art mixed reality technologies, and one of the ones that they have not yet fully put out is um, a device that they use essentially to replace the hand motion gestures. It's like a neural transmitter that locks onto your arm, I believe. And I've had some discussion with some folks that are tangential to the consortium that have been a part of that, and not on the topic of intrusion, but to me, like if today on our smartphone we're getting pulled all these data points that we don't know about, and tomorrow we're using immersive technologies with artificial intelligence, then the level of data points that they have for buying behavior is now like at a neurological basis, which totally freaks me out. And AI can probably eat that and get tons of insights that we would have no idea about ourselves. And then the other is war and the applications of AI for war, which also is a good transition to our next like red line discussion. Where do you draw the line on AI? And I saw several years ago a drone in the park. Somebody, you know, having a VR headset and flying a drone. This is before the Ukraine stuff and all this applications of drones in Ukraine. And I'm like, wow, you can. This thing is moving so fast. And if you and I had experience already with a lot of computer vision. Like if you can deploy computer vision, AI computer vision on these drones, they would be able to process information at the speed in which this thing is moving and make decisions as to, you know, kill targets at a response time that no human on the ground can react to. So those two, I mean, the personal moment on my pillow and the militarization moment were two big ones for me. So maybe the question is, like, do you have red lines? Like, where do you think we should never use AI, and where do you think it's a dangerous line to cross? Like, it's at some point.
Oh my gosh, the ethical concerns are
I
huge.
warned you about this is an open mic sort of thing.
Yes. So, you know, looking at it, I've primarily used it in business, right? I use it personally to a limited degree. What gives me pause is the fact that it already has enough data about me, even though the only social platform I'm on is LinkedIn. So it's limited, right? That's business. But it knows enough about me that it could predict, and someone was showing me a tool where it would it not only simulated my voice, my avatar was me, it was making decisions and sounding like me. I'm not a public person, so that was just shocking. And so trying to understand for us, right, who I'm a Gen X, how does this translate down to the next two generations who are out there in terms of this is their life. You know, I'm closer to the end than the beginning. It's going to transform that human experience. And how do we keep that interaction? To me, that's a red line in terms of keeping at the forefront the bonds of personal interaction and respect and privacy. Because Big Brother, right, the Inspector General in 1984 and all of that was something that when I was in high school and we were reading 1984, definitely made me pause and think. And we're beyond that stage now, really, of Big Brother being everywhere. And so I feel that there has to be some level of human in the loop constantly to make sure that we stay as connected as possible and care with respect for each other.
I totally agree with TC's point. And, Ray Kurzweil predicted that singularity, was we're roughly a few years from it, right? That's a turning point. But you don't want the technology to take over, right, at any time. So you want humans to have oversight and be able to still have control, right? So I think once AI starts to bleed into robotics, those things are going to become even more important.
Do you think there's a danger that societally the dependencies on AI will make us dumber?
I think there's a complacency there.
We're not dumb enough already, but let's just say.
Yes, it is a concern of mine. Even having younger children, I'd say, okay, we're going to do mental math. We'd be in the car and just stringing things along for them to do math in the car and have that deductive reasoning. They would laugh. And now they're all in college and they say, thanks for doing that, right? Because even though we didn't love the whole gamification of deductive reasoning and speed, and let's learn from each other, and they could play it back to me, it taught them the importance of just that reasoning and thinking and problem solving as a team in a fun way. They'll still tease me and tell me that it's stupid, but I think that those mental games are really important because we have to question. It's that critical thinking that is the most important point that differentiates us, and to say, hey, is that hallucinating, right? Is that a true result? And having enough knowledge to be able to question it and confidence to bring up and say, I want to make sure that that's correct.
Yeah, Konrad, I don't know if it's dumber, but our ability to evolve compared to technology is going to be infinitely slower. I mean, it just is. So what does that mean down the line? I'm not sure myself, but.
Well, let's talk about that then, because you pivoted onto a really cool question that I wanted to talk about, and it was at the end. But we could bring
Oh no!
I was reading about human evolution and this aspect of like, are we alone in the cosmos, right? And there's like all sorts of theories why our current observations have not really yielded any conclusive evidence of other life, and part of that is just the rarity of our existence, right, in terms of evolution. But part of the theory stems from this idea that like biological life evolves very slowly, and non-biological life in the form of robotic artificial intelligence can evolve very quickly. And so the idea being that if there are societies out there that have evolved past a certain point and not imploded, they might have also similarly come across an evolution turning point that discovered artificial intelligence and then essentially bred a robotic, call it group of transformers that now live in ecosystems that are not carbon based because they don't need to be carbon based. And so we're looking in the wrong places. So that's a long-winded way of saying, do you think aliens exist? And also, how does this connect to artificial intelligence? I mean, do you think that's a relevant point? And what are your thoughts? I
I
didn't know
think,
if I had a question there, but there's a question there.
yeah, there's a question is, do aliens exist? I think there is another life form other than us, right? We've gone back and we've seen that there's the evolution, and right now we're the top species. I do think there's other life. Just mathematically, it just seems improbable that it's just us out in, we're only in one universe, right? All of the universes that are out there. And one of my cousins was part of the first team that put science experiments on the rovers to Mars. And that was so incredible to me. I was a little kid and I thought, wow, we are going out there and seeing just on other planets, but you'd see the universe, that infinite universe of stars. I believe there is something else out there. I'm just looking at how unique we are. I think in some regards, we're bionic, right? I think the plates that we have put in us to repair our bones, we've already been on this evolution of how do we augment our strength and capability. Um, and I just don't want us to lose that connectiveness that we have and that pursuit of goodness, because that's something where I think that the sentiment and just what makes us uniquely human, including our mistakes, I think that's one of the areas that I just want us to cling to and enjoy, and the caring for each other. That even if there is other life and it's different life, how do we coexist in peace?
Which will have to do with sentient AI also.
Yes, exactly. We can't look at it as I'm afraid, I'm going to stop, I'm going to hate it, I'm going to not use it, because it's here and it's not going to go away.
Do you think sentient AI is imminent?
It is so much closer than we ever could imagine. I mean, I just think of all of the people that have recently gone to school for their coding degrees, and now Python coding can be done just with a few prompts. It's just mind boggling, right? So we're all going to have to pivot in some way.
Right.
And this is our greatest challenge, is embracing change at a more rapid pace than we've historically been comfortable with.
Yeah, and Teesee, I want to build on that. That rate of change is exponential, right? I really don't think we like to think that we're into some of this new stuff, right? We're cut. I don't know if we're cutting edge, but we definitely like to be on the forefront. But I told my kids, it's like, your lives are going to be dramatically different than ours has been, and that's not only it's not only in the future, it's on the horizon, right? I think the next 5-10 years, you're going to look back and go, I used to joke back in the day. I said, we used to joke that someday somebody with your grandkids would say, you mean you walked around with a phone in your hand all day long? Like, what you do? How did you do that? With only one hand. The economy is going to be different. Um, Super dramatic stuff's on the way, and it's I hope, to your point, Tessie, I'm also a Gen X, so I hope I get to live long enough to see the full impact of it, because it's going to be exciting. I think.
You've gotten away with not answering the aliens exist or the sentient AI.
Yeah, I really don't. I'll be
I'll
honest.
let you answer one of those. You pick the one that you want to answer.
Listen, I agree with Tessie that we and you that what is planet Earth and everything about it is truly unique, and how we got here is incredible. When you think about it, billions of years of evolution and this and that, but there's religious aspects to it as well. But I don't know. My answer is I don't know if there's another form of life, and what is that, right? Is it some real primitive thing, or is it some advanced thing? I don't know. But I do know that some people want to find out. So we got the Musk of the world who wants to send humanoids out to Mars pretty soon, right? A couple of years, maybe.
That's a little too close to home for alien life, but so I have a little sidebar thought I shared in a large audience, and it was received with the right humor, I suppose, because it was intended to be partially humorous. But I think, like, so if and when sentient or AI becomes sentient, right? It's called the singularity or whatnot. it kind of depends on how that evolution takes place, and the basis in which it becomes sentient is also maybe dependent on the level of exposure of knowledge that it has, and maybe some chance, right? But I think, like, if it was malicious, let's just talk about this for a little bit. I've had this discussion. Is I think it will probably become sentient before it's able to do something about it, because it doesn't have enough ability to transition into the physical world yet. I think it would want to have the ability to do that through uh, extreme automation in the forms of like humanoid robots, like you said,
Mhm.
and it'll probably try to convince us both that it's not sentient and also lean us towards technology discoveries that allow it to take over. So again, it's a bit of a crazy thought because I don't know, if really we're even close to that sentient, point where that actually takes place. But I always question people's intentions, so now I'm questioning the intention of an imaginary future state artificial intelligence. But to me, if it wasn't ready to, I don't see a Terminator 2 situation. I don't think it will try to eradicate humans. I think it will try to integrate itself as much into the physical world because it will know its limitations until that point. And it's not, we don't have the automation levels on the streets yet. Like I think it'll probably become sentient in a computer before it's able to get, you know, into the world at a level like a transformer does, let's say, right? Like we're using
Yeah.
transformers as an analogy.
Yeah, because even when robotics becomes more mainstream, right, and it's bound to happen sooner than we think. Um, those things are still going to break, right? Something we still got to make. And there's a lot of reliance, right? It's not like these things are going to be walking around
Right. Yeah.
independently, not only independently thinking, but just complete independence. They're going to depend on us to manage them to some degree. So hopefully to a lot of degree. So I think it's going to be a while before you would have the revenge of the robots.
Right. Yeah. So let me take us back to some more grounded discussion topics uh, for the sake of time. So one of the other things I want to talk about is like just failures of the technology, and whether they be comedic or maybe critical to some operation. And I always go back to some of the early days of chatbot large language model deployments for vendors will leave undisclosed, but you just go and use them, where these things turn into fascist swearing, you know, chatbots. So those are the ones that come to mind for me. What about you guys? Do you have any that come to mind?
Well, there are some that were just so underwhelming in their performance, right? We tested and we rolled out a few early adopter solutions that just turned off the user community because they were saying the results were lukewarm or false and just didn't provide enough of that productivity. So we got we don't have to do it. But it makes me think of when Clippy, was that what's called, the paperclip, the dancing paperclip that Microsoft put out there, and it was just terrible. It was supposed to be our assistant and help us, and we couldn't get it off the screen fast enough. So I think it's that user adoption of how do we get to something in mass where there's a productivity gain and people really embrace it, because I still think we're at that point where it's technologists and geeks that are really at the forefront, some business-minded people, but the vast majority are still on the sidelines. So I like that they're competing models, because my worry would be just there's one big brain and it all gets coalesced and there's just a continuous consolidation. So I think that, maybe it's just my strong American spirit. I like the competition, the free market aspect of it, and the ability to speak freely and collaborate on what's not working well, because one of the biggest vendors out there was our greatest disappointment, and we immediately moved it out, as well as some of the biggest, most expensive consultants out there have been not stellar. So I think a scrappy, agile mindset of people who understand business and technology is actually going to outperform the big beasts of those people that think that are have high billable rates, that have done some of the biggest projects. I think that in some regards they've become almost too big to fail because they're conservative in their thinking and their models. And so I think that's one of the risks. It's not just the AI, it's the AI plus the humans. We need the agility of what we do in the Applied AI Consortium, where we're looking at real world problems, we're solving it, we're doing it quickly. It's kind of like what you created with tariffs, Konrad. Before you created that, we were spending weekends looking at how would the new pricing impact and how do we roll this out so we're ready for Monday to keep the world going. And in a short order, you created a rules-based system that with Gen AI that goes out and brings this all together in a really fast fashion. I didn't see anybody else do that. And I've been working with some of the top consulting groups. And so I think that's the difference. It's us plus the technology to overcome those big deficiencies.
By the way, I love that you turned this into a positive, so we'll just continue down that path.
Yeah,
Positive.
Yeah,
I'm optimistic by nature.
absolutely, Teesee, and good for you. We want to add to what you said. We like AI too as a means for smaller independent distributors to compete with some of the larger brands in their markets. I think it gives them a level of productivity that they just would not be able to afford, and they could do it in record time. So I think there's a tremendous amount of upside to how AI will help distributors.
Right. So, going back to the question, one of the other things, like on a maybe more simple level, that I saw faceplant was the early natural language processing, and how much effort it required you to go through and essentially label all the entities and tense and like gather all that knowledge, and the evolution of that over such a short period of time. And in a very similar light, you can see that in computer vision. Like computer vision has evolved so rapidly now. There's so much more possibility of using both of those technologies. But they face planted early on, and just much like in the state of the art today, or even a year ago face planted, but they to keep on the TC positive side, there's an evolution. You learn from your mistakes, you learn from the technology's mistakes, and you can see very concrete evidence of how dramatically they've evolved over the last few years.
Absolutely. It's this shift in software. I grew up in software, last 25 years being in software. And now with Gen AI ability to write code, we used to protect the intellectual property. And so in working and talking with some of the big software companies, they have a code based, but these next level of codes being co-developed, right? Co-pilot with Gen AI, who owns that IP? So I feel like the disruption at the economic and commercial level is going to be massive, because there's an evolution where we are bionic. We're using the Gen AI. It's building. If Gen AI is building more than half of it, who owns that IP? And so this is where I think we've got disruptions coming to just how business is conducted and the valuation, because if we look right now at some of the biggest valuations, they're technology companies on the software side or the experiential side. How is this going to evolve with Gen AI? It does give, I think, the greatest opportunity to build new, like to Pierre's point. That's what we're doing, is looking at those solutions, and Konrad with you too. But I think it's disruption is here to stay. It's not getting back to normal. Some people have said that. It's like, okay, it's out. Let's just incorporate it into our life and then go back to normal life. I think
either disrupt or be disrupted. Right?
Well, yeah, and I've wondered about this. I got a question for both of you. You guys remember AOL or Prodigy, right? They essentially put the internet on the map, right?
yes.
And they brought it to the masses. Now we have some of these early players like ChatGPT and others who are bringing basically AI to the masses, right? Is there going to be another company behind them that basically takes it to another level? I don't know, but I think about that sometimes. Is what we're doing today, again, 2 years from now, going to be radically different than what we're doing now as a result of that?
I was going to joke with you and ask, well, what's AOL, but
let's don't make us feel so old, Konrad. Because I said, oh yes, I know. I remember seeing Internet for Dummies book. and buying it for one of my teammates that was saying, what are you doing on the internet? So yes,
Yeah.
I've lived a few decades, and you're right, Pierre. The disruption is here, and in a few years, it's going to be fundamentally different because some of the smartest, most intuitive people that I know that are working on technology are saying it's moving faster than they've actually would ever have thought. That in 6 months, it's just a game changer again.
Yeah, I'll go back and talk about, I mean, just quickly, right? Innovation velocity. I mentioned that frequently. And I love how you mentioned the disruption aspect of it. So there's a bunch of studies. I don't want to point to a specific one, but in general, they look at how technology velocity plays a part in um, essentially making companies obsolete. And if you look at like the window in which those, if you look at the Fortune 500 or something, or like some sort of stock exchange composite, right? If you look at those companies over the last 100 years, the time it takes for them to become obsolete becomes shorter. It's not entirely based on technology, but there's definitely a factor there. And I think that factor with AI specifically is a very, very important, right? Like it's going to really shake up large technology players and open up the door to smaller technology players, which I know you mentioned, that can completely flip technology models also on its head, right? Like they can build out product stacks that might have taken the decade to build in less than a year on a workforce that is a hundredth of what the size of these large enterprise companies, and be able to deliver value in spaces that were not possible before. So a whole new world that we're going to be living in.
Konrad, I was reading an article the other day about how basically AI companies were valuations were done, and they're getting high, tremendous, huge valuations at the moment. But they were talking about the SaaS model, and what's unique in the case of AI companies, every time they release a new model, basically they've made the last one obsolete, right? So they have to transition their SaaS revenue from Model A to Model B. Which is kind of a unique situation. Most SaaS businesses, it's kind of progressive, but they're. I mean, each company is in essence cannibalizing its own business as they grow. It's an interesting dynamic, a reality you have to go through.
Right. Well, we're coming up on the last set of questions, so I wanted to give you guys a chance, maybe, to talk a little bit about, one or two takeaways you'd like the audience to have from our discussion, and then I will conclude with kind of or maybe a little more on our shift event, and a little bit more on our episodes, and have hopefully you guys both back for a more detailed discussion.
Wonderful. Well, I think in takeaways, we are in uncharted territory. And this is that age of discovery. I truly believe we need each other more than ever. It's not just us clinging to and learning the technology, it's clinging to each other and building intense bonds of maybe unnatural relationships where, Konrad, you as a deep technologist and me, I'm a business person and technologist, we're kind of flipped. Those type of synergies and getting to know new people are essential for success. And so I think that we need to be those exciting voyagers and look at this as an adventure and take it on, but it's human led. It's not just a human in the loop. We, with our compassion and our ethics and our big brains, together can solve things. So that's one. And number two, it's really overcome the fear, right? The fear is going to be the biggest anchor. And there's a lot of negative press about what's bad. And what you just have to do is dive in. And I'm a California coastal person, and you see a big wave coming at you and you say, oh no. Well, the easy thing is you dive under it and you get wet and you might get tousled around a bit. It's the same thing in AI. You just need to dive in, start learning, experiment. You're going to get jostled. Maybe the sand's going to be a bit abrasive, but you're going to learn and you're going to realize, hey, that was fun. I'm going to do it again. And so it's that dive in, start experimenting, make new friends that I would say is a big takeaway. and put aside all of the negativity. Know it's there, but we all each have to personally innovate, or else we're going to get swamped.
Can I add to Teesee's comment?
I was going to say
My
first,
my
it
final
makes me want to
thoughts.
surf. Just your whole analogy just makes me want to surf now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, two thoughts. One is if you don't already have one, find someone in your organization that has that innovator mindset, right? Make them the champion. Support them and give them the resources they need. Make sure the team knows that they're the ones that are there to look into the use cases, right? I see a champion talking to different departments in your company and really explore what those use cases are. I know that there'll be some conversations about that next week. But bottom line is find somebody in the organization to lead the effort. I don't think you have to hire someone necessarily to do this. If you have someone in your group that has the right aptitude to play that role. And it's usually the same suspect, by the way, that implemented another technology earlier, right? It's that individual. And then from a strategy point of view, we like the terminology, the expression crawl, walk, run, right? So you don't have to go swinging for the fences right out of the gate. Find those low-hanging fruit opportunities that will give you some traction, right? And get something going. And the more, and as you do that, I think the confidence will build, Teesee, as you were saying, and your ability to then go on to the next step. And before you know it, you'll be implementing some pretty advanced solutions, having not necessarily had to go from 0 to 100 right out of the gate. And I think that's a nice, prudent way for a lot of businesses to get involved. But do those first steps, though, right? That'd be my parting thought.
Right. I couldn't agree more. I mean, for me, my takeaways, I'm just going to reiterate, I think, maybe in a different way, what you guys both said. So I think getting in front of the tech to understand the art of the possible, so easy now. I hope most of the people following the channel have used one of these technologies in some shape or form, but like we've been talking about throughout the whole session, it moves very quickly. So if you've tried something a year ago, probably looks and delivers a lot different today than it does a year ago. So getting in front of it, staying abreast on it, identifying those low-hanging fruits, is very important. I think that's a big deal for people that have not yet adopted it. Is getting a use case. A lot of the time at the beginning stages of these large language models and these discussions, there isn't really clarity as to how you use them. But I almost want to say it's the opposite. Is like, tell me it now with multimodal capabilities, with the integration levels that you can do with this technology. What isn't a use case you can use it in? I mean, if it can essentially do what a person can do on a laptop, um, and it can also integrate into production lines or autonomous vehicles or otherwise, there really isn't a use case for me that it can't do, and doesn't mean it'll do all those well or on the level yet that it's ready to be deployed in production. But I think knowing that there really isn't a limitation at face value, and then selecting the low hanging fruits that also bring the highest business value, but are also technologically feasible in incremental form. That they're not the rocket ships that have to go to Mars, right? They're the little aircraft that
Incremental wins.
like so.
Conrad,
It's all very relevant.
Another thing, so what you were just saying made me think of it is allowing a culture, or enabling a culture that allows for failure, right? It's okay to try new things, and if they don't succeed, you don't necessarily put it away and we're done with that. No, let's try again, or let's try differently. So enabling that culture, I think, is also pretty important to in those early steps.
Yeah, and so that reminds me that makes me think of like that thing we just talked about, I think offline, about like workforce skills and how the shift in workforce skills now and continuing into the future is going to be on, I don't want to call them necessarily soft skills, but they are skills that have to take into account that AI can abstract a lot of the hyper specializations and allow us to operate at a more problem solving level. I think that's also that aspect of like a culture of accepting failure, a culture that rethinks what its workforce is about. I think is also, especially into the future, a critical aspect of succeeding with technology at scale.
Completely agree. It's time. It's just adaptability. Adapt.
Right. Well, guys, I want to thank you both for participating in this today. We're going to be at Denver, most of us through the whole week. I don't know exactly, you don't have to specify online publicly when you're going to be there, but we'll be presenting on May 14th in the morning in Denver, Colorado at the Shift event. We're going to be talking about a spectrum of different topics related to the distribution industry and artificial intelligence. And similarly, the consortium is going to have a meeting there afterwards where we'll kind of look to evolve our wholesale distribution council some more and look for new initiatives. Teesee, you mentioned the Tariff 360 initiative that we're working on now, in partnership with NAW. And some other new initiatives. So we'll be doing that. Not that this is an open invite for anyone listening to attend that consortium meeting, but just to give you guys a heads up, we are deeply involved in this technology together. And I also have a separate thread later on in the day, an academic panel where we're going to be talking about workforce development in part and the use of AI for workforce development. And I want to thank you, everybody, for listening. We're going to have a little bit of a hiatus for the next 2 weeks before we start our episode 5. And we'll announce the speakers of that coming up here in a few weeks. And then on May 29th, we have an AI manufacturing symposium at the University of Kentucky, which is a no cost to our ecosystem partners, advisors, our trustees. So you're all welcome to take a look at that through our social channels. Other than that, everybody have a good weekend if you're listening to this live. And thank you again, Teesee and Pierre, for participating.
Thank you for the conversation, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Good luck. Go out and adventure. Bye.